Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and stared at the giant screen in front of him. The screen showed a map of space with red dots scattered across it like drops of blood. Each red dot meant another human colony that had gone silent. Another world where families lived and worked and laughed until the aliens came. "Sir, we just lost contact with New Terra," said Commander Ryan Phillips from his station. His voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. New Terra was home to 3 million people, men and women and children who had traveled far from Earth to build new lives among the stars. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Captain Lisa Grant was walking toward him. Her ship, the UES Shadowhawk, had just returned from deep space. The look on her face told him everything he needed to know before she even spoke. "Admiral, I have the intelligence report," Lisa said quietly. She handed him a data pad that felt heavier than it should have. "It's worse than we thought." Jake read the numbers and felt his stomach drop. The Vorthan Empire had sent over 2,000 warships into human space. 2,000. The largest invasion force anyone had ever seen. Their ships were massive, each one 3 times bigger than anything humans had built. Their weapons could melt steel from 1,000 miles away. "How many ships do we have ready for battle?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. 847, sir," Commander Phillips replied. "That includes every combat vessel we can get spaceworthy." Jake did the math in his head. 2,000 enemy ships against 800 human ships. The enemy ships were bigger, stronger, and had better weapons. On paper, it looked impossible. Colonel Amy Davis stepped forward from where she had been listening. She commanded the Marine forces, the soldiers who fought when ship-to-ship combat turned into boarding actions. "Sir, what about the Galactic Council? Aren't they supposed to help us?" Lisa shook her head before Jake could answer. "I spoke with Ambassador Chen on the way back. The Council voted yesterday. They said the Vorthans are too powerful to fight. They're abandoning us." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. For 50 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. They had followed the rules, paid their dues, and tried to be good neighbors to dozens of alien species. Now, when humans needed help the most, their so-called allies were running away. "What do we know about these Vorthans?" Jake asked. Commander Sarah Walsh, the fleet's chief engineer, pulled up another display. "They've conquered 47 different worlds in the last 100 years. Their standard attack pattern is to destroy the military first, then enslave whoever is left. They use plasma weapons that can cut through any known armor." "Any weaknesses?" Jake asked. Sarah shook her head. "Not that we've found. Their shields can stop energy weapons. Their hulls are thick enough to survive direct hits from fusion bombs. They use traditional battle formations that have worked for them for centuries." Jake walked to the big window that looked out into space. He could see other human ships floating nearby, waiting for orders. Each ship had a crew of hundreds of people with families back on Earth, people who had signed up to protect humanity when no one else would. Captain Ben Turner's voice came through the communication system from his ship, the UES Vengeance. "Admiral, the fleet is assembled and ready. What are your orders?" Jake thought about his options. He could order the fleet to defend Earth directly. They could set up defensive positions around humanity's home world and wait for the enemy to come to them. It was the safe choice, the smart choice according to military doctrine. But Jake had spent 30 years in space. He had fought pirates, and rebels and hostile aliens. He knew that waiting for the enemy to pick the time and place of battle was usually a mistake. The Vorthans would gather their forces, study human defenses, and attack when they were ready. There was another option. A crazy option that every military advisor would call suicide. "Lisa, how long would it take the Vorthans to reach Earth if they keep moving at their current speed?" Jake asked. 6 days, sir. Maybe 7 if they stop to destroy every human outpost. Along the way, Jake made his decision. He turned to face his officers. "We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We're going to meet them at New Terra." The bridge erupted in surprised voices. Commander Phillips was the first to speak clearly. "Sir, that would mean taking our entire fleet into enemy-controlled space. If we lose, Earth will be defenseless. If we wait, we lose anyway, Jake replied. The Vorthans expect us to run or hide. They think humans are weak because we use older technology. They think we'll follow the same battle plans every other species has used. Colonel Davis stepped forward. What do you have in mind, sir? Jake smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had decided to do something dangerous and necessary. We're going to show them that humans don't fight like anyone else in the galaxy. He opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. 847 ships received his message at the same time. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We have our orders. We're going to New Terra to face the Vorthan fleet. I won't lie to you. The odds are against us. The enemy has more ships and bigger guns, but they don't know how humans fight when we're backed into a corner. Jake paused and looked around the bridge at his officers. These people had served with him for years. They trusted him even when his orders seemed impossible. Prepare for hyperspace jump. We leave in 1 hour. Make sure every weapon system is ready and every crew member knows their job. Today we find out what happens when someone threatens humanity's children. The fleet began moving into formation. 847 ships preparing to face an enemy that had never lost a battle. An enemy that considered humans to be nothing more than primitive animals with lucky technology. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Warlord Zexthul stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship was 5 miles long and carried enough weapons to destroy an entire planet. Around him, screens showed the positions of his fleet. 2,000 ships spread across the New Terra system like a deadly net. He was reading reports about the species called humans. The reports made him laugh. These creatures were new to space travel. They had only been flying between stars for 100 years. Their weapons were primitive. They used metal bullets and simple explosives instead of proper plasma energy. Their ships were small and weak. Warlord, the human colonies have all been destroyed, reported Commander Vextal, his second-in-command. The planet New Terra burns. 3 million humans are dead. Zexthul nodded. It was always the same. First, they destroyed the military bases. Then they burned the cities. Any survivors would be taken as slaves to work in the Vorthon mines. It was a system that had worked perfectly for a century. How many human ships escaped? Zexthul asked. None from the colonies, sir. But our scouts report a large fleet moving toward us from Earth. Zexthul looked at the tactical display. Red dots showed where human ships were traveling through hyperspace. The computer calculated their numbers. 847 ships. 800 ships, Zexthul said with amusement. They think they can fight us with 800 tiny ships. The other Vorthon officers in the command center made clicking sounds with their mouths. It was how their species laughed. The idea of humans attacking them was the funniest thing they had heard in years. Commander Vextal pulled up more information about human military tactics. Sir, the humans fight in very simple ways. They form lines and shoot at each other until one side gives up. They have no understanding of advanced space combat. Zexthul had conquered 47 worlds. He had fought the fierce Rigelians with their crystal weapons. He had defeated the clever Centaurans with their invisible ships. He had even beaten the proud Altarians who thought they were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Humans would be easier than any of them. When will they arrive? He asked. 6 hours, sir. Should we prepare an ambush? Zexthul thought about it. He could hide his ships behind the planet and attack the humans when they came out of hyperspace. It would be over in minutes, but where was the fun in that? Where was the lesson for the galaxy? No, he decided. We will meet them in open space. I want every species in the galaxy to see what happens when someone challenges the Vorthan Empire. We will destroy them slowly, ship by ship. Make sure our communication systems record everything. While the Vorthans prepared their victory celebration, the human fleet traveled through hyperspace. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Morrison held a final meeting with his ship captains. The meeting happened through video screens since the ships were still traveling faster than light. Captain Ben Turner from the heavy cruiser UES Vengeance spoke first. Admiral, I've been looking at the intelligence reports. These Vorthan ships have shields that can stop any energy weapon we've got. Their plasma cannons can melt our armor like butter. Are you sure our new weapons will work? Admiral Morrison looked at Commander Sarah Walsh, his chief engineer. She had been working on new weapon systems for 2 years, systems that had never been tested in real combat. The mass drivers should work, Sarah said, but she didn't sound completely sure. We've done computer simulations. Solid metal projectiles moving at very high speeds should punch right through their shields. But we've never tried it against real Vorthon technology. Captain Nick Hayes from the fast attack ship UES Lightning raised his hand. What if they have defenses we don't know about? What if our intelligence is wrong? Then we adapt, Admiral, Morrison replied. That's what humans do. We change our plans when the old plans don't work. Commander Ryan Phillips brought up a tactical display showing both fleets. Sir, the Vorthons will probably form their traditional battle line. It's what they've done in every fight for the past century. They put their biggest ships in the center and smaller ships on the sides. Admiral Morrison studied the display. And what do they expect us to do? Form our own battle line and trade shots until one side breaks, Phillips answered. Then we won't do that, Morrison said simply. Colonel Amy Davis leaned forward in her chair. What's the plan, sir? Morrison smiled the same dangerous smile he had worn earlier. We're going to do something no other species has ever tried. We're going to fight like humans. He pressed buttons on his control panel, and the tactical display changed. Instead of showing 2 neat lines of ships facing each other, it showed something that looked like chaos. Human ships scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that seemed random. The Vorthons think they know how space battles work, Morrison explained. 2 fleets line up and shoot at each other until someone wins. They've been doing it the same way for 100 years because it always works. Captain Turner looked confused. Sir, military doctrine says that scattering our forces makes us weaker. Unity of command and concentration of firepower are basic principles. Basic principles that every alien species follows, Morrison replied, which is why the Vorthons always win. They've learned to counter every traditional tactic, but they've never fought an enemy that refuses to follow the rules. Sarah Walsh began to understand. You want to coordinate our fire while scattered? Across the battlefield. Link all our targeting systems together. Exactly. 847 ships acting as one weapon system. They'll be expecting a traditional battle. Instead, they're going to face something that's never existed before. The fleet began dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Terra system. One by one, human ships appeared in normal space and immediately began moving into positions that made no sense to traditional military thinking. On his flagship, Warlord Zexthal watched the human ships arrive. His tactical officers tried to understand the human formation, but there was no formation. The ships seemed to be scattered randomly across a huge area of space. What are they doing? Commander Vextal asked. This makes no tactical sense. Zexthal laughed again. They're panicking. They know they're about to die, so they're running in all directions. It will make hunting them more entertaining. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. The face of Admiral Morrison appeared on his screen. The human looked calm, which surprised Zexthal slightly. Usually enemy commanders were terrified by this point. Human Admiral, Zexthal said in his heavily accented English, you have made a mistake coming here. Surrender now and some of your people may live as slaves. Morrison's expression didn't change. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. You have attacked our colonies and killed our people. You have 30 seconds to leave our space, or we will remove you. The command center erupted in clicking laughter. Remove them? These tiny humans were going to remove the greatest military force in the galaxy? Zexthal was still laughing when he gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All ships, attack formation. Let's show the galaxy what happens to species that don't know their place. The Vorthon fleet moved into attack formation like a giant wall of death. 2,000 ships arranged themselves in perfect lines, just as they had done in every battle for the past century. The biggest ships stayed in the center where their massive guns could do the most damage. Smaller ships spread out on the sides to catch any enemy trying to escape. Warlord Zexthul watched from his command chair as his fleet prepared to destroy the humans. Everything was going exactly as planned. The humans had scattered their ships across a huge area of space, which meant they couldn't support each other in battle. It was the worst possible tactical mistake. "Sir, the human ships are moving in. Strange patterns," reported Commander Vextal. "They're not forming a battle line." Zexthul looked at the tactical display. The human ships were indeed moving strangely. They darted back and forth like frightened animals. Some ships flew toward the Vorthan fleet while others moved away. There was no pattern, no formation, no sense to it at all. "They're running around like scared children," Zexthul said with contempt. "Target the closest human ship and destroy it. Let's end this quickly." The nearest human ship was the UES Lightning, commanded by Captain Nick Hayes. It was a small, fast vessel that had moved closer to the Vorthan fleet than any other ship. To Zexthul, it looked like an easy target. "Fire," he commanded. The Eternal Dominion's main plasma cannon charged up with a sound like thunder. The weapon could destroy a city with one shot. It fired a bolt of pure energy that lit up the darkness of space. The bolt traveled at nearly the speed of light toward the small human ship. On the bridge of the UES Lightning, Captain Hayes watched the plasma bolt coming toward them. His crew was ready. They had trained for this moment for months. "Deflector array online," reported his weapons officer. "Brace for impact." The plasma bolt hit the Lightning's deflector shield. For a moment, space around the ship glowed bright blue. Then the energy scattered and disappeared, leaving the human ship completely undamaged. Silence filled the Vorthan command center. The most powerful weapon in their fleet had done nothing to the small human ship. It was impossible. "Fire. Again," Zexthul ordered, his voice no longer confident. 3 more Vorthan ships fired their plasma cannons. 3 more bolts of deadly energy struck human ships. 3 more times the energy scattered harmlessly off strange human shields. "How are they doing that?" Commander Vextal asked, his voice shaking. Before Zexthul could answer, the human ships did something even more impossible. They began moving faster than physics should allow. The scattered human fleet suddenly coordinated into a complex 3-dimensional dance of destruction. Admiral Morrison's voice came through the communication system to every human ship at once. "All ships, execute pattern Omega. Show them what happens when you threaten our families." The human ships moved with perfect coordination. Ships that had been scattered across millions of miles of space suddenly worked together like parts of a single machine. They accelerated to speeds that made Vorthan targeting computers struggle to keep up. Captain Ben Turner's heavy cruiser UES Vengeance led a group of human ships in a flanking maneuver that had never been seen before in space combat. Instead of flying in straight lines, they curved around the Vorthan formation like water flowing around a rock. "Impossible," Zexthul whispered. "Ships cannot coordinate at these distances. The communication delay alone should make this impossible." But the humans had solved problems that other species hadn't even known existed. Their quantum communication systems allowed instant coordination across vast distances. Their computer networks linked every ship's targeting system into one giant brain that could predict enemy movements and adjust tactics in real time. Commander Sarah Walsh's voice came through the fleet communication system. "All ships, mass drivers are charged and ready. Targeting computers are linked. We have firing solutions on all enemy vessels." The human ships had been moving seemingly at random, but now their true purpose became clear. They had positioned themselves so that every Vorthan ship was targeted by multiple human vessels. The scattered formation that had looked like chaos was actually the most sophisticated battle plan in galactic history. "What are mass drivers?" Commander Vextal asked, trying to understand what was happening. Zexthul didn't know either. The Vorthan intelligence reports had said humans used primitive projectile weapons, metal bullets fired from simple guns, nothing that could threaten advanced Vorthan technology. They were about to learn how wrong their intelligence had been. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the confusion of battle. "All ships, fire." 847 human ships fired at exactly the same moment. But these weren't the primitive weapons the Vorthans expected. These were magnetic accelerators that could launch tungsten rods at 30% of the speed of light. The projectiles were small, no bigger than a person's arm. But when something that small moves at 30% of light speed, it carries more energy than a nuclear bomb. And the humans had fired not just one, but thousands of these projectiles. The Vorthon shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, were completely useless against solid objects moving at such incredible speeds. The tungsten rods punched through, the shields like they weren't even there. Warlord Zexthal watched in horror as his flagship shook under multiple impacts. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Damage reports flooded in from every section. "Hull breach on decks 40 through 60, reported a panicked officer. "Engineering section destroyed. Main power failing. The Eternal Dominion, the most powerful warship in the Vorthon fleet, had been crippled in the first seconds of combat. Around it, other Vorthon ships were suffering the same fate. The proud fleet that had conquered 47 worlds was being torn apart by weapons they didn't understand. "Return fire," Zexthal ordered desperately. "All ships return fire." The surviving Vorthon ships tried to fight back. Plasma cannons fired at the human vessels, but the humans were no longer where the targeting computers expected them to be. They had moved to new positions while their projectiles were still in flight. Captain Lisa Grant's reconnaissance ship, UES Shadowhawk, danced between plasma bolts like a leaf in the wind. Her ship was small and fast, designed for scouting rather than fighting. But linked to the fleet's targeting network, even her small weapons became part of the coordinated destruction. "Target the command ships," Admiral Morrison ordered. "Cut off their ability to coordinate." The human fleet adjusted its targeting priorities instantly. Ships that had been firing at random Vorthon vessels now focused on the command and control centers. More tungsten rods flew through space, each one guided by computers that could calculate the exact position of enemy ships several seconds in the future. Colonel Amy Davis watched the battle from her position on the Marine assault ship, U.S. Bulldog. Her job would come later, if any Vorthon ships survived long enough to be boarded. But as she watched the tactical display, she began to wonder if that would be necessary. The Vorthon fleet was falling apart. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for a century were breaking into pieces under the human assault. The perfect formation that had intimidated so many species was now a scattered mess of burning wreckage. "Sir," Commander Vextal said to Zexthal, "we need to retreat. We're being destroyed." Zexthal looked at the tactical display. In less than a minute of combat, he had lost over 300 ships. The humans had lost none. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever seen. For the first time in his life, the great warlord Zexthal gave an order he had never given before. "All ships retreat. Full speed to the hyperspace jump point." But as his remaining ships turned to flee, they discovered something that made his blood freeze. The humans had predicted this move too. Fast human ships were already waiting at the jump point, blocking their escape. The Vorthon fleet tried to escape, but there was nowhere to run. Captain Nick Hayes and his fast attack squadron had moved to block the hyperspace jump points before the battle even started. The human ships waited like silent hunters, cutting off every escape route. Warlord Zexthal stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red warning lights flashed all around his damaged command center. Half of his mighty fleet was already destroyed or badly damaged. The other half was trapped with no way out. "How did they know?" he whispered. "How did they know we would try to retreat?" Commander Vextal, bleeding from a head wound, tried to answer. "Sir, the humans seem to predict our every move. It's like they can see the future. They couldn't see the future, but they could see patterns." Human military computers had studied every Vorthon battle for the past century. They knew exactly how the alien fleet would react to different situations. When humans did something unexpected, the Vorthons would respond in predictable ways. Admiral Morrison opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, execute final phase. No enemy vessel leaves this system." The human ships moved into their final attack formation. What happened next would be remembered as the most devastating 60 seconds in the history of space warfare. The remaining Vorthon ships tried to fight back desperately. Plasma cannons fired in all directions, lighting up space with deadly energy. But the human ships moved like ghosts, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Captain Ben Turner's heavy cruiser UES Vengeance led the main assault. His ship launched a full spread of mass driver rounds at the Vorton flagship. The tungsten rods, moving at incredible speed, hit the Eternal Dominion from 6 different angles at once. The massive alien ship, 5 miles long and armed with enough weapons to destroy planets, split in half like a broken toy. Warlord Zexthal had just enough time to realize his 1,000-year empire was ending before his command center was vaporized, but the humans weren't finished. Commander Sarah Walsh had one more surprise prepared. She activated a new system that linked every human ship's weapons into a single targeting network. 847 ships became one giant weapon. Synchronized fire pattern activated, Walsh reported to Admiral Morrison. All ships locked onto designated targets. The human fleet fired as one. Thousands of projectiles launched simultaneously, each one aimed at a specific target calculated by the combined processing power of the entire fleet. The targeting was so precise that multiple rounds hit the same weak points on enemy ships, maximizing damage. Vorthon vessels that had survived the first attacks were torn apart in seconds. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were reduced to scrap metal floating in space. The proud fleet that had never known defeat was being systematically destroyed. Colonel Amy Davis watched from her marine assault ship as the battle unfolded. Her job was to lead boarding parties onto enemy vessels, but there were fewer and fewer intact ships to board. "Colonel," came a voice over her communication system. It was Lieutenant Tony Park from the reconnaissance team. "We have Vorthon survivors, requesting surrender. Several ships are trying to shut down their weapons." Davis looked at Admiral Morrison on the main screen. In traditional Vorthon warfare, surrender was not accepted. The aliens usually fought to the death or enslaved their enemies, but humans fought differently. "Admiral, we have enemy ships trying to surrender," Davis reported. Morrison nodded. "Accept their surrender. Have them power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded." "We're not like them, Colonel. We don't kill prisoners." This decision would be as important as the military victory itself. The human fleet began accepting surrenders from Vorthon ships while continuing to destroy those that kept fighting. Captain Lisa Grant's reconnaissance ship UES Shadowhawk moved through the battle zone, rescuing survivors from both sides. Her medical teams treated wounded Vorthons alongside injured humans. This act of mercy, broadcast across the galaxy by the Vorthon communication systems, would change how the entire galaxy viewed humanity. The battle was now in its final phase. Less than 45 seconds had passed since the first shots were fired, but the Vorthon fleet was completely destroyed as a fighting force. Ships that weren't already destroyed were either surrendering or trying desperately to escape. "Commander." Ryan Phillips coordinated the final attacks from his position on the Defiant. His targeting computers tracked every remaining enemy vessel. One by one, they were either captured or destroyed. "Sir, enemy ship attempting to ram our formation," reported Weapons Officer Lieutenant Kate Wilson. A damaged Vorthon cruiser, its weapons destroyed and engines failing, was trying to crash into a group of human ships. It was a desperate last attack by a crew that preferred death to surrender. Captain Turner's UES Vengeance intercepted the enemy ship. Instead of destroying it with weapons, Turner ordered his ship to physically block the ramming attempt. The two ships collided, but Turner's crew had prepared for the impact. His ship's stronger construction and better damage control systems allowed it to survive while the Vorthon vessel was disabled. "Enemy ship disabled, sir," Turner reported. "No casualties on our side. Preparing to take prisoners." Admiral Morrison looked at the tactical display. 57 seconds had passed since the battle began. The most powerful military force in known galactic history had been completely defeated. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. "All ships, cease fire," Morrison ordered. "Begin rescue operations for all survivors, both human and Vorthon." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in over a century, a Vorthon fleet had been defeated. Not just defeated, but completely destroyed in less than 1 minute of combat. On the few surviving Vorthon ships, Alien crews stared at their screens in shock. Many of them had never seen their fleet lose even a single battle. Now they had lost everything in less time than it took to drink a cup of coffee. Commander Vextal, now the highest-ranking surviving Vorthon officer, opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His voice was barely a whisper. "Human Admiral, we surrender. We request mercy for our remaining crews." Admiral Morrison's face appeared on Vextal's screen. The human leader looked tired but not angry. There was no hatred in his eyes, despite everything the Vorthons had done to human colonies. "Commander, power down all your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your wounded will receive medical treatment. Your survivors will be treated according to the laws of war. This is Admiral Morrison's promise." Vextal had expected death or slavery. Instead, he was being offered mercy by an enemy whose people his fleet had just finished massacring. It was a concept so foreign to Vorthon thinking that he could barely understand it. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you show mercy to your enemies?" Morrison's answer would be quoted in history books for thousands of years. "Because that's what makes us human, Commander. We fight to protect, not to conquer. We win wars to create peace, not to create more enemies." The Battle of New Terra was over. The most one-sided victory in galactic military history had taken exactly 57 seconds from first shot to final surrender. But the real victory was just beginning. News of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by the Vorthon communication systems that had been meant to broadcast their triumph. Instead, they were broadcasting the news that would change everything. Humanity had not just survived their first major galactic war, they had won it in less than a minute. The news traveled across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours, every spacefaring civilization knew what had happened at New Terra. The Vorthon Empire, the most feared military force in known space, had been completely destroyed in 57 seconds by a species most aliens considered primitive. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Morrison watched rescue ships moving through the debris field. Human medical teams worked alongside alien survivors, treating wounds and saving lives without asking which species the patients belonged to. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Lisa Grant approached Morrison with a datapad full of messages. "Sir, we're receiving communications from all over the galaxy. Everyone wants to talk to us." Morrison looked at the list of names. The Centauran Republic, the Rigelian Federation, the Altarian Commonwealth. Every major government in known space was trying to contact Earth. Many of these same governments had refused to help humanity just days before. "What about the Galactic Council?" Morrison asked. Grant's expression was carefully neutral. "Chancellor Velak has requested an emergency meeting. He says the Council wants to discuss immediate military cooperation with humanity." Morrison almost smiled. 3 days ago, the Council had voted to abandon humanity to the Vorthans. Now they wanted to be humanity's best friends. Politics never changed, no matter what species was involved. "Tell the Chancellor we'll consider his request," Morrison said. "After we finish cleaning up the mess his council refused to help us with." Commander Ryan Phillips was coordinating the rescue operations from his station. Human ships were pulling, Vorthon survivors from damaged vessels and providing medical care. The aliens looked confused and frightened. They had expected to be killed or enslaved, as was normal in their culture. "Admiral, the Vorthon prisoners are asking strange questions," Phillips reported. "They want to know when the executions will begin and how long they'll be kept as slaves." Morrison walked over to where Commander Vextal, the highest-ranking surviving Vorthon, was being held under guard. The alien officer's wounds had been treated by human doctors. He was sitting in what humans considered a comfortable chair, though he looked like he expected to be tortured at any moment. "Commander Vextal," Morrison said gently, "you and your people will not be executed. You will not be enslaved. You will be held as prisoners of war according to human military law." Vextal stared at Morrison with large, confused eyes. "I do not understand. We destroyed your colonies. We killed millions of your people. Why do you not take revenge?" Morrison sat down across from the alien commander. "Because revenge doesn't bring back the dead, Commander. And because someone has to break the cycle of violence that has plagued this galaxy for centuries. But this is not how war works, Vextal protested. The strong conquer the weak. The victors enslave the defeated. This is the natural order. Maybe it was, Morrison replied. But humans are going to try a different way. Across the galaxy, the reactions to humanity's victory were immediate and dramatic. On the Centauran homeworld, President Talvar called an emergency session of Parliament. The Centaurans had been the next target on the Vorthon invasion list. They had expected to be fighting for their survival within months. The humans have done the impossible, President Talvar announced to the packed assembly hall. They have defeated the Vorthons in open battle. We must immediately open formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Species that had lived in fear of the Vorthons for generations suddenly found themselves free. The galactic balance of power had shifted, completely in less than an hour. But the most important reactions came from unexpected places. On backwater worlds and forgotten colonies, slave populations that had been captured by the Vorthons began to hope for the first time in years. If someone could defeat the Vorthons, maybe someone could free them too. Captain Ben Turner was leading salvage operations when he received a priority message from Earth. "Admiral, you need to see this," he told Morrison over the communication system. The message was from President Sarah Kim of the Earth Federation. Her face appeared on the main screen, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Admiral Morrison, congratulations on your victory. The entire planet is celebrating, but we have a situation developing here that you need to know about." Morrison frowned. "What kind of situation, Madam President?" "We're being contacted by representatives from over 60 different species. They all want the same thing, military alliances with humanity. Some are offering technology, others are offering territory, and a few are offering to become human. Protectorates." Morrison rubbed his forehead. He had been expecting this, but not so quickly or on such a scale. President Kim continued, "There's more, Admiral. We're receiving messages from slave worlds throughout former Vorthon space. They're asking for human help to free themselves from their remaining captors." Colonel Amy Davis looked up from her reports. "Sir, we have the resources to help some of them. My Marines could liberate several worlds if we act quickly." Morrison thought about it carefully. Humanity had just proven they could fight and win against impossible odds, but with victory came responsibility. The galaxy was looking to them for leadership they had never asked for. "Madam President, tell our new friends that humanity is willing to discuss alliances based on mutual respect and shared values," Morrison said. "We won't be anyone's protector or master, but we'll stand with those who believe in freedom and peace." He paused and looked around the bridge at his officers. These people had just changed galactic history. They deserved to know what came next. "As for the slave worlds, we'll help anyone who asks for it. But we're not going to build an empire, we're going to build something better." Commander Sarah Walsh brought up a new display showing human space and the surrounding systems. "Admiral, what exactly are we going to build?" Morrison smiled, and this time it was a genuinely happy expression. "We're going to build a galaxy where no one has to be afraid anymore, Sarah. Where species can develop and grow without worrying about being conquered or enslaved." The communication system activated with an incoming message. Captain Nick Hayes appeared on screen from his position near the hyperspace jump point. "Admiral, we have incoming ships. Multiple species, all flying peaceful approach vectors. It looks like everyone wants to talk to us personally." Morrison nodded. "Let them come. Captain, it's time for humanity to take its place in galactic civilization. Not as conquerors, but as protectors of those who can't protect themselves." In the months that followed, historians would mark the Battle of New Terra as the end of the age of fear and the beginning of the human era. Not because humanity conquered the galaxy, but because they chose to free it instead. The Vorthon Empire was finished, its remaining territories liberated by human-led coalitions of former victims. The Galactic Council was reformed with new principles based on cooperation rather than submission to the strongest. And in the military academies of 100 worlds, young officers learned new tactics based on human innovation and coordination. But more importantly, They learned new principles based on human values of mercy, protection, and justice. Admiral Morrison kept his promise. Humanity didn't build an empire. They built something that had never existed before in galactic history, a civilization based on the idea that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what humanity had intended. In the official records of galactic military history, the Battle of New Terra was recorded with a simple entry. Duration, 57 seconds. Outcome, total human victory. Significance, changed. Everything. But Admiral Morrison preferred the way Commander Vextel described it in his surrender statement. The day the humans taught the galaxy that there was a better way to be strong.